have visibility to that. You guys have visibility to that. So when you talk about headcount reduction, it doesn't necessarily just need to be teachers and certified. It could be other non-teaching type of positions. And then I brought up the point about Forward Edge, right? And them as a consultant, basically with services, we're paying $600,000 more for those versus 2 years ago. Is that because they do all the work and we pay them for that versus a technician that could cost a third of that and buy it ourselves? I don't know those answers. But there's other ways you could save money potentially. And your point is basically somebody else made, I think John Becker at one point, zero baseline budgeting, right? Don't assume that you have the money from last year. Say justify your numbers. Why do you need it in 2020? Right? Don't go saying I spent it last year, so I'm going to spend it this year. What are those baseline numbers of what you actually need? Because the issue here, as I see it, isn't the fact that you have a unbalanced, it's, Julie said, it's unsustainable, right? The increase. But that also is impacted what is the base that you're increasing it from. And from just the basic view that I've seen, there's some things that have increased that base $1 million, $1.5 million, that if you could reduce it, that base by $1 million, $1.5 million, you're halfway to John's balancing in 2020. And when you start off at a lower base, and then hopefully you could decrease the slope a bit, then it doesn't become an issue about, 3 years out having $9 million. You could have it $9 million with, a half of that amount and have $9 million in 2 years. Basically, if you reduce your starting point and reduce the slope, that's the issue. And I would ask for those that are in industry and not teachers, okay, in the last 10 years, let's just say last 5 years, how many got a 4% increase every year? Okay, I can tell you that I didn't, okay? Some years it was goose eggs, right? And some years it was 2 or 3 max, right? So one of the things as well as baseline for teachers, I don't know what the baseline for industry, we had comps, right? You'd say this position, this time of experience, here's the comps of what those people are paid at various locations, right? And so you try to match those comps or keep people employed because you don't want to have turnover either. And teachers are, you're basically a service organization, right? So you want to maintain the morale and not have the turnover. But I have no idea, and I'm sure you do these comps, okay? Where are we, today's pay, against comps of, the neighboring teachers, okay? Are we at the average? Are we above average? Are we gaining on the average? It just seems like, from the economy, if we're, the inflation is 1.67 over the last 5 years, and we're increasing everything by 4 or 5% a year, you're right, it's unsustainable, and you're going to have ever-increasing levies, which is evident by the fact the last levy, was 4.2 million coming in. Now we're looking at the one that failed was 6.2. Now we're looking at 8.9 or something, right? 9.95. Anyhow, you're going to have an ever-increasing amount of money. And what the community is saying is that that's not sustainable for us as a community. That's not even talking about, buying 110 acres and building 3 new buildings and half the money from the levies going into middle school and high school and all the rest. That's not even, those things are aside. Just the operating levy, okay? It has to start with the baseline, what you're spending as a baseline, and justify it and look at it. And so when we talk about transportation and teachers, okay, first don't look at the transportation and teachers, look at all the other areas you could save. The gentleman back here made a point that teachers 83%, but if you got $1.5 million that aren't teachers, okay, that's $1.5 million levy, right? But my point is that you reduce the starting gate, right? You're reducing the base, and so now your increases as actual dollars is less every year because you've started at a lower base. That would be the point I would make is what is that number, right? That you could, you brainstorm areas to take money at. We've looked at it from, the outside looking in, and I've identified some areas, at least for questions, as far as the base increasing. I mentioned a couple of those. There may be a few more. Kevin and Dr. Amy Cross is more involved with the numbers. There may be other places, okay? But if, 83% is in salaries, maybe that's a point in 2021 when this contract is renewed, Maybe it's not a 4% increase a year, right? Who is making a 4% increase a year, right? Nobody. In my experience, over the last 10 years, nobody's making a 4% increase a year, okay? As a baseline. Promotion, a different matter. But baseline, I show up, I come to work, I'm gonna get 4% increase every year. Nobody gets that.
Just to be clear, our LA agreement last time was 2% and 2%.
Yeah.
2% plus 2%.
It was over 2 years though, sir.
There was a.
No, it's 4% on 2
It's 2 years. Trust me, it's 2 years, 2%, 2%.
My understanding in the contract is that every year it's 2% plus 2%. That's what you put in here.
2% plus 2%. But it would be a step on increase. Example, if you're at year 20 to year 30, you only get 2%. You don't get the experience. Experience stops at year 20.
And there are gaps in there also.
So there'll be 15 years where there's no experience step. It's just, it's
So
15
yes,
years.
20, once I hit 20 years, once I hit 20 years, I won't get another experience step after that. I will count any raise that we get, which sometimes was 1.5, has been 2.
Why is it budgeted at 4 then?
Yeah.
The budget is 4.
I'm just a lovely teacher, man.
Why would you budget at 4 then?
So not everybody has hit that max. I mean, this part of the art in doing it is finding an average of that. So that's what the 4% is. There are a lot of teachers who are still on the experience step. So not every step is 2% either. So we don't have a flat from 0 to 1 to 2 to 3 is 2%. There's variation in there. So that's why it's at that. It's part of the.
We're using the 4 as the high.
Yeah, it's the 4 is the high end though.
I mean, a little bit of the high point, but it's a
So
conservative.
somebody's getting 5 and 6.
What's that?
If somebody getting 5 and 6, make the average 4.
That should be possible, that would be the reality.
Can we model that? I mean, take the actual staff that you have and put it into the system and run through the matrix.
Here's the problem.
It's important because this is a big difference, 2% versus 4%. And you project that over, compounded annual growth rate, that's a big difference.
If you step back from all this and you say, what are we all talking about? We're all talking about things we all don't, some of us know a whole lot about, some of us know a little bit about. And, we're sitting there thinking, we want to get the public support for whatever we do. And I remember at the end of July, I gave this speech after the no's won. I believe say it that way, and I try to reflect on what happened. And it was kind of simple, really, because you looked at what, we were rushed to make a lot of quick decisions about things, and it was a bad way to do it. It was the only way we could do it, because we only had 8 to 9 weeks to respond to something we didn't think was quite right. And now the tables are turned. And you guys don't have to have the same kind of situation we had, because you got time here to think about this. You don't have to rush 2 weeks from now to try to get something on that none of us really. Every time I pick up a piece of paper, read data, or look at a report, I have 10 more questions. And I think the people in here, I met some of them with the different things, that we can get some groups together and say, yeah, let's tear this thing apart. Let's look at school funding sources. Let's look at forming committees to engage legislature. Let's look at school funding needs, operating needs, but don't do it all in a big group. Get people that know about these things to work together to try to get a plan together. So come November, we can all sit back and say, yeah, this is reasonable for the community. Because we are getting ourselves in a corner here. Because I'm telling you, I sat at the polls all day in the rain and met a lot of nice people. A lot of people are really upset. If we walk out and say, a month, 2 months later, well, we got the answer now, they're going to say, you're not listening to us, you're not paying attention to us. And I think we have an opportunity to do a great job here if we give ourselves the time and come up and do this right. Do all the things
I would second what you're saying.
Yeah, do all
Trying
the
to
things
ram it in March is
Yeah,
just.
so all the things we're talking
And
about.
you've got money in the bank, you're not gonna die next year.
And
You got a problem, but you're not gonna die next year.
there's nobody in
Take the
this.
time to do it right.
Yeah, nobody in this room is sitting here, well, let's blow this thing up. We're all here because we want to try to fix it.
Yep.
So that's my humble opinion about it.
Agreed.
And I know a lot of people that I work with, and I'm very proud to work with because I met a lot of great people that really care a lot about this stuff. But let's do it right. Let's not rush to this thing and make a big mistake and then get more and more folks looking at us like, are you all nuts? Because it was there. I mean, well, I went around and I counted the votes at a couple of polling places and reported them. I was floored when I saw the numbers. If that doesn't tell this community something, I don't know what does. So I think.
So what do we do if it doesn't pass in November? Or do you
But
think we don't
see
worry about
that-
that?
I think,
No,
I think
no,
that's,
no.
I think that's what John's
No, I
saying.
think that's
Come up
the
with a
point. You gotta come up with
Yeah.
a plan.
Because if you alienate any more folks, you're not gonna get enough people to vote for this thing.
You've got, up on the board, you've got trust issues
Yeah, you
and
got,
transparency, and it gets out in the community, like 3 weeks from now, it's gonna go on the ballot in March. Everybody's gonna say, whoa,
we want to see
why?
rumors
I don't know
fly.
anything
Wait till
yet.
this one goes out.
You
You
gotta
better all
Or-
change our phone numbers and addresses.
You gotta put the sales pitch together
Yeah.
and then put it on the ballot so everybody's in. But you say it's going on the ballot, no sales pitch, no transparency, I think you're
Well,
dead
and,
again.
and no bigger plan, because the building issue is still out there.
We got.
What's
So
Oh.
I hear you, and I, despite what we all know how I felt about the last one, like I haven't made a decision and I don't know how I feel, but I sort of feel like we're coming in saying, this is what we should do, and I don't feel like I can make a decision right now. I don't feel like I know enough.
Right, and you don't
About
have
both
to. You
sides.
don't have to be forced into that right
We're
now.
saying the
That's-
same
No, but
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 why?
I'm also saying I'm not comfortable saying we're gonna wait
I
till
think
November.
you
I'm
can
not
go and
comfortable
say, I
saying
have a
that.
trust in people that if we come up with something reasonable, will support this. People, if you look at the history of this, in all places I've lived, people support the right stuff. I have faith that if we come up with the right plan, we'll get.
I'm glad that you have faith. I don't necessarily, and I'm just saying, like, I feel like there needs to be more discussion. I'm just not comfortable saying, no, we're not gonna put a ballot
But
on.
us having a discussion and not having,
Well-
break this thing down and use all of our brains to put together and talents, to say, let's have this group focus on this group, focus on that, so we can all defend what we're asking.
I hear what you're saying. I'm just
That's all.
expressing another point of view.
Angela, one of the differences, or one of the issues that I think Dr. Kraus addressed this is, regardless of whether we vote in March or November, if we pass a levy in March or November, the impact relative to schools is the same, right? If we
Right.
pass it. The danger is, if you wait till next
Absolutely.
November and don't pass it, well then, now you're in trouble.
But also if it, I'm sorry, you go ahead.
Well, and the conversation then moves, and that's mitigating the risk that Dr. Kraus spoke about, that we're kicking the proverbial can down the road, although at least what I hear, and lost trust is very subjective. We're talking a lot of facts here, and then when we talk about lost trust, that's an individual feeling. The reality is, I have trust, but I tend to lean toward the fact that having a little more time might be fortuitous. Because, and again, it's subjective as heck, but what the general sense was we didn't have enough time as a community to react, and that's why the vote swayed the way it did. And so it feels practical that if we go right back to a spring vote, that we'd have a lot of work to do to mitigate the problems from the first go-round. But we'd be walking into a situation where the narrative could very easily be, here we go again.
I'm big on verbiage, and so this community, just being new here, it's been a blessing, and then also, like, I have a life, and like, do I want to even get involved in this? So, I think the verbiage is really strong to unite together for a levy by November, but that also means possibly March, right? But if we all committed to a levy passed by November, that doesn't exclude this idea of an earlier one. And if the magic happens, right, and we have that trust built by then, I think then that's when we make that decision. And that's kind of what I felt like coming in.
You got 2 weeks.
Right, that's what I'm saying, magic. It would take magic.
Hysterical land.
Right, we're walking right into it, it's perfect. But that's what I'm hearing, is everybody wants a passed levy. Like, there it is, like, we all do want that. It just is gonna take way more of what happened last week, obviously, relationship building and conversations in those pockets of small, smart minds on what they're passionate about, right? So I just say that we need to change this verbiage, because I see you guys shutting down as somebody says March, and then like somebody says November and it's the other side shuts down. So we need to really stay open to just levy by November and allowing it to happen. Like, we don't need to force this. We really don't. We're all working together. I see that through and through.
I think we can also involve the community and communicate clearly with transparency and build that trust with everybody that would be voting by November so that there's like a 100%, we know what we're doing, we know why we're doing it, and we all agree we did it the right way.
Yeah, by November.
By November.
By November.
But it's not an on-off
So-
switch.
If we say, let's wait till November, and we don't put something on in March, what are the cuts gonna look like what are the cuts gonna look like? What is gonna need to happen? I mean, we have to do something,
That's
yes?
the detail we've got to get when we go, if we go that way, that's the detail.
I guess that's what I'm saying. I'm not comfortable
don't
saying,
know.
I understand what you're saying. I'm saying, I'm not comfortable saying we're not gonna put it on March, not knowing what cuts that's gonna result in. That's the information I think.
If we don't know, then the wedge is even deeper in March if we don't know. We have to know.
Yeah, so, and I think what Dale was saying earlier is, okay, look at all non-personnel first and say, what can we remove from non-personnel? And, answer the question about Forward Edge, what can we remove that's non-personnel? If we had a list next week that said, okay, here's non-personnel things we think we could remove. It might include some transportation things that for next year we would say, we're gonna take that off. We burn down that list, okay, we come up with whatever, I'll just throw $1 million, it's a nice round number. And then we say, okay, from there, it would mean that there's, Amy said, five teachers, loaded salary, that's $450,000. Then we make some trade-off decisions to say, okay, are we comfortable with that? That's the trade-off. If we don't go for March, we're probably gonna have to do that for the next
That's a great way of saying it. I wanna know what the trade-off is.
So, so I think we have to come up with those scenarios to say that's the trade-off, that if we have to plan for next school year, that if November didn't pass, we have to make those changes at the beginning of the school year, because most of them are, things that are in contract that we can't impact for the next calendar, for the next school year.
I want to talk about personnel for just a moment. I'm a teacher, so I came from a district that levy failed over and over and over again. We went to 0 steps, 0% increase for a few years. One of the things that we did there was they offered early retirement to teachers over a certain amount of years. And I felt like that was a nice option for personnel, instead of saying, okay, we're gonna get rid of 5 people, because honestly, if you're getting rid of 5 people, it's probably it's the newer teachers that are making less money. To give the personnel that option of, and I think it was even like 10 years, if you had 10 years, you got a certain amount. And so some people wanted to be stay-at-home parents, and so they took that retirement because they're like, I kind of want to stay home now. I kind of want to do this. But they got the retirement out of it. And I kind of felt like that gave them a voice, and it wasn't like we were cutting people. We were giving them the option. And I know that saved a tremendous amount of money where I was.
The other thing is how many, just to add on to that point, is how many teachers will be retiring in the next 2 years, right? And not replace them instead of hiring them. Is just have an attrition and do natural attrition and backfill it then as required, but not every position. Those are.
What if I had 27 years and I was trying to get to 30, but they offered me some kind of incentive, I might tap out to 27.
To piggyback on what you're saying, part of the last negotiating agreement, we fought to have a compensation committee. Okay, and it was done once before, and it kind of went to the wayside. Bring that back and do the compensation committee and talk about things like that. How can we do things differently, maybe at Loveland that maybe works out for everybody? And you brought up one of that's a question I have is what if can we offer early retirement? What does that look like? How much does that cost? What's the impact on our staff and things like that? So that's a very good point.
Also, what's the impact on the kids? I mean, right now my kids are in 29 kid classrooms, so we offer this retirement package. There goes that teacher. My kid's now in 32, 35 classroom. I don't know.
But they could hire in a younger teacher.
Okay, teacher. Got
it. You're a 27-year teacher.
Got it. And now you're going to hire in. Okay. Is that already encouraged and already? Are you already hiring, like already right now? Like when somebody leaves, are you already hiring new, I'll say, teachers, base teachers?
The majority of the teachers that we're hiring are younger.
Okay.
Entry level. Or, you never say younger, it's always entry level.
What's that?
Entry level.
Entry level, thank you. Well, yeah, me and my verbiage have always been a problem, so yeah.
So like a first grade, we get 500 applications for a first grade teacher, sure. But if we're looking,
Right, that's the point. If you're looking for something special, like an AP physics teacher, you're not gonna hire, you're gonna have to find someone experienced, yeah.
The other thing would be helpful to John's point.
If you can find one.
I'm looking at page 21, and by the literal language here, how I understand the contract, it's 2% annual increase in base salary and 2% annual increase in annual experience step. So if that's not accurate, then it'd be helpful to have what is the actual.
You say that again.
I'm on page 21.
My way I interpret that is that somebody, and I don't know the exact steps, but 0 to 5, you get a one-time, say 1%. And then when you hit the 5 to 10, it's kind of like retirement plan investing. When you hit the 5 to 10, then you maybe get a one-time 1.5%. So I think
That's what I'm saying, so that's not what the language here says. That's not how I understood the contract when I read through it. So I'd like to just have it clarified.
Being a number guy, I think the contract, teacher contracts are visible for everyone to see, correct?
No, I have a copy of it.
Like, so it should show, it should show the salaries.
By year, and
It should show like,
salaries.
yeah, it should show
and
like the steps, like how many years experience they have.
It has 0 through 30 if you want
Correct.
to stay there, but not do the advanced degrees. You just go, that's why I'd like to
You
explain.
don't, you
what
can see
that
the
looks like.
step schedule, but not necessarily a 2% like.
It's one of the appendix 1 or appendix A in the contract listed on the left side. It has numbers, 1 through 30, right, with annual increases. And so my assumption, because it doesn't say it every year, but it's by year, and this tells me it's by year, so that's not saying it's not. So just maybe a side explanation at some point, understanding that, because
So Dale, you're just circling back to that point.
I'm going back to what John said, it's not annual, and yet it says it's annual. And the fact that
It is 2%.
no, 4% is annual base salary, there's no question there, but
He
then,
wasn't saying it's not annual, he's saying it's not 4%.
So this feels like we're in the weeds a little bit,
right.
and I know,
But
like, I
it's
haven't had
critically
to.
important because it's the slope of the
Right,
curve.
like,
It's a slope
I
of the
understand what
curve
you're saying.
of 83% of the spending, right?
So
And
I'm
that's-
also like feeling that teacher feeling that I get sometimes when like people start getting restless and kids start packing up their bags a little bit, right? So like, what do we need to do next between now and December 3rd? It feels to me like maybe we have lots of questions that we want to get answered. Is that fair? Like, so do we need to brainstorm those questions? Do we need to put those questions on Post-it notes? And then, so the board can kind of sort them into categories so they can figure out how to answer it. We want the board to come back and give us possibilities of, if we don't put the ballot, or if we don't put the levy on in March, here are 3 scenarios. What do we want? Or what do we need to make an informed decision?
well, we can bring you back some scenarios. I'm a little uncomfortable with questions because December 3rd is literally the day after tomorrow. Right, I mean,
Right.
so
Yeah,
the
fair.
ability to be able to, the ability to give
Right.
any impression that
Anybody is having any time
Right.
to answer
And
questions.
the-
Yep,
the-
something to
the-
say.
so the-
That's fair.
So the point of this group is, are we going in March or November? So like, to me, we'll come back with some scenarios to give that. What I'd like you guys to think through is settle this in and what are some of the implications? Like in thinking back at some of these things. So March, I hear that we're gonna be a problem with this trust and being able to bring people along. One of the things that I think about with November is this notion of scare tactics, because there's gonna have to be a cut list. And people aren't gonna like it. So just, it's an implication. Like, no matter what we do between now and November, and there's 20 times the number of people that come and we're all like, oh yeah, we're all in. It's still not gonna change the fact that it's gonna come down to yes or no, here's what happens if it doesn't. So these things are gonna bump up. They're just implications.
Well,
It's not,
that's where you use
it's,
us to help you with that,
right. I'm just saying that that's what, I just want you to think through those for the next time. Because the 3rd, we're also going to be talking about the implications of property and not property because we have to act on that contract by March 1st. So the Groveville property is the topic for the third too, and we can come back with some scenarios. So I just don't want to give the impression that other than, and we're prepared to sort of, I don't know what happened to Kevin, I'm just, he was over there a minute ago.